Hello, my fellow fallible humans. This is the Red Roof Recovery Show, an addiction recovery program to soften the path of recovery from substance and behavioral addictions. And it's not just for addictions, it's for life. My name is Tanya McIntyre. I'm here with you every week to share my experience around my own recovery from drugs and alcohol. I created Red Roof Recovery to provide not only a unique program for residential recovery, but to also develop a relapse prevention program. And these programs are based on the principles of rational emotive and other cognitive behavioral therapies, along with various other tools of therapy. You've heard me say that there are hundreds of tools of therapy, literally hundreds. The key is to find something that clicks for you, something that works for you. And then when you find that, assuming it's something that's good for you, you want to grab onto that and then do more of it. On this episode of the Red Roof Recovery Show, I have Lancelot back joining me for his endless support. Lance is my husband of 30 plus years. He's lived with me through my addictions. And he's actually also recently he's studying now to become a fellow SMART facilitator. SMART is an acronym for Self-Management and Recovery Training. It's an addiction recovery program based on rational emotive and other cognitive behavioral therapies. And I've been a facilitator with SMART since 2018. And it's definitely a program that has helped me remain abstinent from harmful substances and behaviors. So I've spent a long time in recovery circles. I've been in AA. I still go to AA meetings. Some are good, some are not so good. I love the slogans of AA. I use them all the time because they're memorable, and when something is repeated time and time again, after 8-9 years of being in the rooms of 12-step programs, it starts to settle into the neural network, and what we practice grows stronger. So I like to say one day at a time, and it works when we work it, and take what you need and leave the rest. And like I said, some meetings are okay, some meetings not great. So find what works for you and then do more of it. I still go to AA meetings because they're more plentiful. What sent me in search of looking for a more secular program when I was about 9 years into my recovery was because I was going to a lot of funerals. In 12-step programs, a lot of people were relapsing and not returning from their relapses. I was relapsing a lot, and I knew it was just going to be a matter of time before I didn't come back from one of my relapses. So I went in search of something else that I could bring to my community, and there wasn't a lot to choose from when I went in search in 2018. And at that time, Smart Recovery had been around for more than 20 years in a place called Mentor, Ohio. It was founded there. And that resonated with me because mentorship had been very important and relevant to my life. So I became a SMART facilitator in 2018, and I'm happy to say since that time I have managed to abstain from harmful substances and behaviors. So there's a lot to be said for that, for me, that it expanded my consciousness, my understanding. And when I started to delve deeper into my thought processes, then I was able to better manage my thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. So my Lancelot has just recently retired. If you've listened to a few of the previous episodes that we've done together, he retired sooner than later because we are now just over 2 years into the global pandemic. Well, that's what it means to have a pandemic. It's global. And he was doing a job in Toronto that he hated, and commuting and living apart for a week at a time and then seeing each other on the weekends. It just wasn't a quality of life that we were enjoying very much. And of course, my being involved with SMART, self-management and recovery training, one of the tools that I love to use in our recovery circles is something called the cost-benefit analysis, whereby you take a sheet of paper and you put a big cross on the paper, and then you've got 4 quadrants to work from. And on the top, you want to list the advantages and disadvantages of continuing to do something, and then on the bottom 2 quadrants, the disadvantages of continuing. Did I get that right?
I think so.
Advantages, disadvantages of doing, advantages, disadvantages of not doing. So we did this cost-benefit analysis pretty much every weekend for a few months until the benefits of not returning to Toronto finally started to grow. So that kind of marked the beginning of your early retirement. So I'm grateful because you have stepped in to be with me on this program, and I have to say, it's getting some great feedback, and I'm not great with technology, but when I do remember to upload an episode to YouTube, the ones that we've done together have gotten the most response, the most views.
Oh, that's nice.
Isn't that nice?
It is.
People like our banter back and forth together because I can talk a lot about my addictions, why I became addicted, and what's working for me in my recovery. But people, I think, are more curious. I get a lot of my outreach is coming from family and friends of those who are living with addictions. And family and friends, I mean, you were my family.
And
living
your friend,
with me
hopefully.
through my addictions, and I never really considered what that was like for you because I was, in my own little dome of illness for so long. So let's talk about what that was like for you, because in recovery circles we talk about hitting bottom or rock bottom. What was your bottom? That's a topic of conversation in recovery circles. And I really dislike the term because I think it feeds the shame-based stigma that persists around addiction and recovery. So I prefer to use the term catalyst for change. I find that a little more self-empowering. I'm a little fanatic when it comes to our language and how we're using our language around addiction and recovery, because some language, I think, and language is very subjective as well. So what works for some people doesn't work for others. For instance, when I go to 12-step meetings, I don't like calling myself an alcoholic or addict. Some people who have been going to these meetings say, oh no, I like that, it motivates me. So if it works for you, absolutely. Labeling myself that way did not work for me. It made me feel more ashamed and heavy and flawed, defective. I didn't want to feel that way. So I prefer now to go to the meetings and say, hi, I'm Tanya, and I am grateful to have another day free from drugs and alcohol. And what that does is turns a lot of heads in the meetings, but it also generates conversation after the meeting, and it opens up some dialogue that probably I wouldn't have had the opportunity to have if I hadn't taken that position. So I'm really big around words and how we're using our language in recovery. So my catalyst for change for me came in 2009. And in 2009, we were living in Spain, and I made the decision to check myself into a 30-day rehab. So we were married in 1991. You lived with me at that time for 18 years while my addictions were progressing. And I'm curious to know what prevented you from leaving me during that time, because I'm not sure I could have hung in with somebody who was in active addiction for 18 years. How did you do that?
Well, the thing is, your addictions, you were managing them quite well. And you would go through a period of more use, and it will get worse and worse. And every 6 months to a year, I'd turn around and I'd say to you, I think it might be time to just pull in the reins on the use of the alcohol. And you'd take this to heart and you'd say, yeah, sure. And you'd go through the period of measuring out, only having 2 drinks of a night. And you seem to be managing it.
I actually did use a measuring cup as well.
Yes, you did. And you'd manage it. So, yes, you had a problem, but it wasn't a big impact problem at that time.
That you could see.
That I could see.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the big change came when we went to Spain, where, because of our circumstance, you not being able to work, not having the culture there of being one of many retired people who started drinking early in the morning, had a siesta, drank of a night time. I was at work, I didn't see it, and it got pretty bad pretty quickly.
It did.
And I remember standing in the kitchen in Alcudia, in the north of Mallorca, and saying to you, I think it may be time to rein it in a bit. And this time there was no. It was, you ran up one side and down the other, and how dare you, and got very belligerent. And I thought, oh, this isn't good. However, shortly after that period, you reached out to Serenity House, unbeknownst to you, that night, and you went into rehab.
So just a little backstory for those of you who don't know that story. We had an opportunity to move to Mallorca, Spain in 2007. And that was our intention, was to semi-retire there because you had a wonderful job opportunity. I was going to teach English as a second language. And when we got there, the Spanish government wouldn't recognize our Canadian marriage certificate. They wanted the long version. We only had the short version. And there was a lot of politics happening between Canada and Spain at the time that wasn't helping as well. So I was mired in bureaucracy for 2 years, and I couldn't legally work in the country. And also, we were arriving to a country that, my addictions were escalating in Canada as it was at that time. And then we moved to Spain, where I discover that my two favorite things, brandy and wine, are cheaper than water there. So what it did for me, because I had idle time and depression and anxiety about, being mired in this bureaucracy and feeling hopeless and helpless. So my addictions spiraled downward very, very quickly.
Yes.
Probably saved my life in many ways.
Quite possibly. I think if we'd stayed in Canada and we'd carried on going through you want to put a hold on this a little bit.
The waves, yeah.
The waves. You were just hidden it more.
Yeah.
And in the end, it would have got really bad. Instead, you went into rehab and started your journey to sobriety.
Yes, it certainly is a journey.
Yeah. And
I managed my addictions. And another thing that annoys me in recovery circles is that we actually label each other and judge, assess, judge, evaluate everything, people included. And we talk about high bottom drunks and low bottom drunks. So the low bottom drunks being the guys and girls who are drinking out of a paper bag, homeless, living under a bridge or sleeping on a park bench. And a high bottom drunk, that's where people considered me to fall because I managed it very, very well. However, that management, what it looked like for me is that I was dragging myself through my life. I had a high-profile vocation as a broadcaster, and I was going to work sick every day to a point where I actually bought a waterproof garbage receptacle that I could keep in my car so I could throw up on the way to work and on the way back from work. And I would medicate myself to get through the day. So that's what, if that's what is considered a high bottom drunk, then I guess I was. But I managed it by the skin of my teeth, by my little tips of my fingers.
Yeah.
I don't really consider it managing. I was dragging myself through my life. So I think the move to Spain and the spiral downward very quickly likely saved my life, and going into rehab.
And I think also is that I became more aware of it because in Canada I worked an awful lot of hours. Again, I travelled to work for over an hour and back, and I'd work 10 to 12 hours every day, most weekends. So consequently, we didn't have a lot of time together. And so there wasn't a lot of time and we didn't socialise much. But when we went to Spain, because the culture is an outdoor culture, going down to the square in the evening, and events in the different bars and what have you, it became very evident that, every time we went out, you were staggering home. Now, you hid the times when you were staggering upstairs to bed because I had to go to work and I'd go to bed earlier than you, so that was hidden. But I could tell that it was getting worse far quicker than it was when we lived in Canada. So I think the question about what was it like for me, as I said, there was no real conflict because you seem to be managing it.
Mm-hmm.
And if one thing I have learned through my life is that there is nothing I can do to influence what you're doing. That's entirely down to you. So I was just there enjoying the good bits and reining in when it got too bad, which you would do until Spain.
Mm-hmm.
But then you did reach out to try to find help.
Yeah.
Which was a big thing.
It was a big thing, I think, not only for me, but for you as well, to see that I was at least making an effort to do something. But what you didn't know is that I was relapsing a lot. So I would manage to abstain for maybe a year or 2 years at a time, and then I would relapse. But again, I managed those very well and lied to you about it.
Well, I think it depends on the relapse. You know, how many people have a bad week, and
I think just about everybody has bad weeks.
Comes home on a Friday and they go, "God, I need a drink," and have, you know, too many beers, a couple of bottles of wine, feel absolutely awful in the morning, and it totally ruins their weekend. How many people go through that?
Everybody, I think, at one time or another.
Yeah. So life throws these little bumps in the road, and the way I like to put it is, you know, the wagon's going to hit a bump, and sometimes you're going to fall off the wagon. But if you dust yourself off and get back on the wagon, it shows that you're trying. You're trying to manage your addiction. If you go for a wander in the back 40, that's a different matter, because then you're just indulging yourself in your addiction, and you're not trying to find your way out of the addiction.
Mm-hmm.
And I think for the person living with the person with addiction, a lot of it is to do with seeing that you are trying to help yourself. Because like I say, I can't help you. I can be here to support you, but I can't stop you drinking.
Yeah.
So, you know, the fact that you're actually doing something, and if life throws a curveball and you fall off, and, you know, one weekend you get absolutely annihilated, but on Monday morning you get up and you go, "Oh, that was totally stupid," like, and suffer with it for next week. But again, do it a year, 2 years, 3 years, hopefully forever, but you never know.
Mm-hmm.
That shows a dedication to trying to make your life better. And with that, makes my life better.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, you know, I was waking up in the morning vowing to make a change every day when I was in my active addiction. It didn't change the fact that I was walking toward a vodka bottle at the liquor store after work. So, you know, again, we know so little about addiction, which I think is why I'm so passionate about the topic, because there's just so much to delve into. Is all we really know about addiction is that it's a complex condition. It's a chronic illness. And, you know, people have said, well, it's about your inability to regulate dopamine levels. Well, yeah, I suppose it could be. There's another theory that perhaps it's just an inability to regulate moods and emotions. Yeah, absolutely, perhaps. I became habitually incapable of managing my moods and emotions as a child when I was going through trauma. If you listen to someone like Dr. Gabor Mate, who has spent many years dealing with chronically addicted people, he said the common thread among all of them is trauma.
But there are a lot of people who go through trauma
and don't become addicted.
And don't become addicted.
I know, right? Therein lies the paradox.
So, you know, what is it? Is it, you know, for the grace of God, there go I? You know, or is it something in our makeup that we're unable to get over that trauma?
Well, we know we're all wired differently. Addiction affects people differently, and people are going to recover differently. What works for me is not going to work for somebody else, and vice versa.
Yeah. So, with what you're doing now, SMART, is there's a whole plethora of different tools. Because, as you say, we're complex, so the toolbox has to be complex as well. You tried AA, and it helped.
It's a great personal development program.
Yeah.
Definitely.
But it didn't work as well as SMART does.
No.
For you.
For me.
For you. But there's totally different things in SMART that could work for a lot of people. And maybe in, with AA and other types of therapy, maybe you need more than one.
I'm really glad you are studying to be a facilitator because you will be such a great resource for family and friends because you can speak from that position.
Yeah, it's one of the things, there's a lot of emphasis on the person going through the addiction, which is right. I mean, they're the ones that are suffering the most. But they're the people living with them. They're on that journey as well. They're, when you go wandering in the back 40, we are dragged with you in a certain way.
And feeling helpless and a bit hopeless.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and there aren't many resources out there for family and friends of loved ones who are challenged by substance use disorder, alcohol use disorder. Yeah,
so
the pickings are slim.
They are. But what people who are on the journey with the person with the addictions has to realise that you have a choice. You have a choice to look after yourself. And that could mean leaving the person with the addiction.
I was going to ask that was going to be my next question for you. So when we went to the destination wedding in Honduras, I decided it would be a really good idea to drink during that trip.
Yeah, wasn't a good idea.
And I think maybe that might have been your catalyst.
That was definitely the point where I thought.
What year was that? That was about
6
years ago. Yeah.
Yeah. So 2016.
So we're doing this show in 2022. So that 2016.
Yeah. So you'd been actively on and off the wagon, but you were, you were trying. You seemed to be trying really hard. You'd have little slips, but that period and that vacation, you seemed to be reveling in there was no moderation. You were going full bore. And I thought to myself, I'm not sure I can do this anymore. Because one of the things that I didn't want to happen, which would most probably happen, is that if I decided to stay with you doing what you were doing, I'd end up resenting you. And then I'd end up disliking you and possibly even hating you. So would it be better to leave with the memories of a really nice relationship and also help myself get away from that environment? And at that time, yes, I would have walked away from. If you'd carried on that path, I would have walked away. And I think people who are living with people with an addiction have to realise that maybe that is the only option you're left with if you want to look after yourself. Now, there's all different types of reasons why people won't. Everything from if you're married to the person who's bringing in the money.
Yeah,
that's a hard one. You don't want to be seen as leaving someone, societal judgment. Oh, like Tanya was unwell and he left her. Like, what type of person does that? The social judgment, the guilt of not trying hard enough. Surely I could have helped her get out of this, which you can't. You can't do that.
So the analogy used is the airplane analogy when we're flying in that metal tube and the flight attendant is giving the directions, the safety instructions, that if the cabin pressure changes and the oxygen mask falls down from the ceiling, we are instructed to put the mask on ourselves first because we can't save anybody until we save ourselves first. Really difficult concept for people to grasp, I think.
It is, like I say, because there's so much judgment about it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, yeah, from
it's construed to be selfish.
Selfish, yeah.
Yeah.
But if you're being dragged around the back 40 and it's harming you, because in the end it will harm you. Like, it will harm your psyche, it will harm the relationship, and yeah, is that worth it? Because I'm afraid I didn't have the addiction.
Well, we've got 3 minutes left, Lancelot, and we were going to talk about the work of Richard Schwartz, because I always talk about the mentors who've been relevant to my life, and Dr. Dick Schwartz has certainly been one of them. He's was a family therapist, and created through his work something called the IFS approach for treating mental health disorders like addictions. IFS is an acronym for Internal Family Systems, and the theory being, and Gabor Mate agrees with him on a lot of those points, is that we each have a family living inside of us. And addiction is a family affair. We say that a lot. And if we have this dysfunctional family also living inside of us, holy mackerel. Where do we start to unravel that? So I think we're going to dig a little deeper into
Mr. Schwartz?
Yeah, into the work of
Sure.
Dick Schwartz. So I encourage you to look him up in the meantime. IFStherapy.com, I think. Don't quote me on that, but Dick Schwartz, Richard Schwartz, you'll find him if you just Google that. And if you are family and friends looking for support of living with someone, if you have a loved one suffering with any kind of addiction, behavioral or substance, you can get support from Smart Recovery. You can go to their website, smartrecovery.org, and click on Find a Meeting. And there are several meetings for family and friends, specifically online right now. So please do that, and there are lots of resources on the website as well to explore for you. Thank you so much for being here, spending 30 minutes with me every week. It's an integral part of my recovery journey, I tell you, so thank you. And I want to now promote 2 books that I did in honor of my philosopher dad. Mindful Wisdom from my philosopher dad's sage advice from a single father. And I wanted to create a legacy for my father. He was an extraordinary man, bringing up children in the 60s and 70s on his own. It was quite an anomaly for the day, and he was struggling with his own addictions at the time. So I wanted to actually celebrate this with him while he was still alive, but he sadly died before I could finish the book from Alzheimer's. And then during the pandemic, I wrote a second book in his honor. This one is called Daily Wisdom from my philosopher dad. This one I set up as a daily journal with inspirational messages to guide your days. So I would love that you buy the books at amazon.ca, and also they're available at Finchers in the Square in Canada's prettiest town of Goderich, Ontario. And on this journal book of daily wisdom, reflect on the daily message and then write your thoughts and intentions for the day, because I think the power of words is very powerful, and the power of the written word is life transformational. May the force be with you, and remember, you are the force.